Good morning, my name is Filiberto Amati, and I'm here today to have a chat about Kaliro Spirits and Nove di Dante, an emerging vermouth in the world of spirits, with the founder, who I'm going to be introducing in a second. The big question that we have is what's going on in the vermouth category. First of all, I would say that in the world of beverages in general, a lot has been happening in the past 10 years, probably. There is a lot of innovation which is completely destroying traditional category boundaries. No, we call this process glorification. But on the other hand, a lot of new brands are emerging in areas which we didn't think was possible 10, 15 years ago. At the same time, a category like vermouth, which for probably 20, 25 years has been a monopoly of one brand, maybe two brands, a duopoly, and at the same time was losing volume, losing grounds, and losing a bit of his appeal, traditional appeal, has been re-emerging in the past years with a lot of new startup players, with a variety of offerings, and we would love to understand a bit more of what's driving this trend, and which is why we are here today with Alejandro Ouziel, who's a spirits veteran, adventurer, traveler, and is the founder of Kaliro Spirits. Welcome, Alejandro.
Ciao, Filiberto. Very nice to be here with you today.
Good to have you. And to help me in this adventure today, I have Chris Maffeo, who's another Italian who shares with me a very appropriate and relevant love for the Negroni. So actually we are feeling very homey today. And of course, there's an experience in beverages. He consults with us, but he's also a beverage consultant and a former beer brander. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Filiberto. Nice to be here, Alejandro, and to meet you, and looking forward to this chat.
Let's start with Kaliro, Alejandro. Where did the journey started, and why did you start this journey with Kaliro Spirits?
Journeys always start with the first step, right? But as you know, and probably everybody who has chosen to go into an entrepreneur journey, it starts with an idea that takes some time to brew, in this case to blend or even distill, and it comes from an idea, from a philosophy of the way that drink is enjoyed, and particularly the way that drink is enjoyed very much so in the Mediterranean way of life. Where drinking itself is not a purpose, but merely a process for connectivity, a process for creativity, and for enjoying something that we have all suffered over the last few months, which is social interaction. So it's very much a concept of enjoying the moment. And the word Kaliro, in fact, is a word that we made up from two ancient Greek words, and it comes from kalos and kairos. And kalos means beautiful, and kairos means the right moment. So it's about enjoying the moment, enjoying that right moment, slow living, enjoying life, and living for the moment.
And I like the idea of the moment. It's a great combination, I think. Let's talk about your key brand, which is Nove di Dante, correct?
Correct.
Or 9 of Dante. How do you call it?
Nove di Dante.
So you have basically launched a very traditional category relatively, I would say, very innovative recipe. You do your own blend. You explain your Italian heritage and roots, but you also look forward to a consumer and a consumption moment, which is very urban, which is very modern. So how do you mix all of this, and where does the idea come from?
Well, the idea, I think, it comes from the essence of Italy's and Italians' approach to life. You know, you're a country which really values tradition and values quality and values its culture, but you don't let all of that heritage stick you in the past. You use all of that for constant innovation. You use all of that for reaching to new heights. You know. And I think that is exactly the concept that we've been trying to achieve with Nove di Dante. You know, we've gone for a category which understands very much the quality of product, like it should be in the case of the wine, the case of the mountains and of the ecology, in this case of Piemonte. But we want to position it in a new lifestyle, in the style of a new generation, a generation that cares very much for origin, but doesn't want to hear all the time how that's the way it should be. You know, they want to use all that experience, they want to use all of that know-how, but to live life the way they want to do. And that's why we have a vermouth which really uses all of that experience that for hundreds of years has grown and developed in the Piemonte region, but we position it in a way out of the vermouth category. We want to say, in a way, we are a vermouth that is not a vermouth. You know, some of the things that you see around our branding, that you probably would see them more often in a bourbon category. So we want to appeal to a new consumer, because although vermouth is starting to trend, it's still a category where younger consumers still have to really venture into.
Yeah, I think it's also a category you need to explain to younger consumers, because we start having an age, so we know what vermouth is. But for younger 20-something, 21, 22, 23 years old, like vermouth, what is it? Especially for a category which, by the way, has been, dominated by one brand, which is usually referred as to the category. But why vermouth in the first place? Is there a reason? Is there because you like vermouth, or is there a deeper driver for you for choosing to be a player in vermouth?
There is a philosophical element of yes, personally liking it, and really it is a product that plays to very much that Kaliro moment that we were just talking about earlier, right? There is also a business context. I think, like when you say when there is a monopoly or a quasi-monopoly, a market cannot function properly. It degenerates. It becomes. It stagnates. It runs out of ideas. So I think it's important to have competition for a market to be healthy. But the most important is that there are three trends which we are seeing today, which are driving towards vermouth being a drink for today and for the years to come. The first one is that consumers are looking for experiences with lower alcohol content. There is a few theories about why this is the case. I think it is largely linked to how we are involved in a digital world today. We spend the whole time in front of a screen. When there's a few hours that we leave those screens and we go and talk to friends, we want to be able to spend time with them and value that time and be conscious of that time. So the lower alcohol content allows us to control how that process goes on. The second one is that we're still going through a very strong gin and tonic craze. It's probably the drink of the the decade, if we want to make a drink. And the particularity of this drink with the gin and the tonic has meant that the consumer palate has become more bitter over the last few years. We have seen this also with the growth of IPA beers, for example. So less sweet, more bitter. And vermouth takes on a lot of those categories with the bittersweet taste, and I believe that is one of the taste profiles that goes with today's consumer. And last, there is an element of cocktail culture. Cocktails really grew at the turn of the 19th century. And they have gone through many phases, but in the last 15 years, it has driven through a revival that started in London and New York, and we have seen that become much more democratic. So consumers are enjoying and discovering cocktails, and vermouth plays a huge role in cocktails. Cocktails would not have existed without vermouth. They were grown from vermouth. And today, even in the top 10 cocktails in the world, 30% of them have vermouth in them. So in one way or another, most people are drinking vermouth, and they not even know they are drinking it.
Besides vermouth, what are the other Kaliro categories? What are the other categories that fit that vision? Which you might be working on, or you might be enticed to be working on for the future?
Look, for now we are fully focused on the Nove di Dante adventure and in contributing to the revival of vermouth as a category. So in a way we are constantly obviously looking what may be happening out there, but without a clear intention to go into further categories at this stage for at least the next 18 months or so. But obviously there's a lot of movement going on. I think that this cataclysmic shock that we've all lived in the last 3-4 months will lead to some changes in social behaviors. Those social changes will lead to some changes in the way people drink and interact with alcohol, and so there is opportunities for new things for sure.
Okay, we talked about the cataclysmic effect of the pandemic. Chris and I had actually a chat on what we think is happening on the on-premise channel, but I think it's interesting to put that a bit more in perspective.
I mean, like talking about on-premise in particular, Alejandro. Like you and Filiberto spoke previously about the fact that it was a quasi monopoly. The vermouth category was a quasi monopoly. Let's call it a duopoly. There was the French way and the Italian way mainly of doing vermouth, and of course there's a Spanish way. But we went from there to actually many people and craft producers starting to produce vermouth, and now it's producing from Scotland to Australia, pretty much all around the world. What is your how do you compete in this context of very going from a quasi monopoly to a very fragmented craft space?
You're right. I mean, there is a big craft movement developing in vermouth, particularly in Spain and to a certain extent in Italy as well. This is a sign of health, and there's a sign of interest. And I think that as a player in this market, it is something that energizes me. It gives an opportunity to have a lot of different conversations with competitors, but also with the bars and the bartenders that interact with our own product. I think that you do need to have a lot of players in for a category to get momentum. It's a little bit of you don't quite know which one leads to the other, but they both fit one another as well, you know. And I think this is great, you know. When you look at it from a more international perspective, so a lot of these craft manufacturers, they don't have an intent to go internationally. They are very happy to serve a local community. Some of the other ones, they would like to, but it's one of the hardest things in developing a spirits brand is having an access to the distribution channel and get to the consumer, and particularly when you talk from an expert perspective. So I think that is going to be where the big differences happen over the years, and there will be a natural selection process that, of course, all of us are going to try to fight to be on the ones that make it at the other end. And I think if we look at, I was talking about gin earlier. If we look at the way gin has developed, it has been very similar. It started with also a duopoly 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and then one brand comes, it becomes exciting, and then the next thing you know, 200 brands are launching every year, you know, and you wonder who needs another gin. Well, it doesn't matter if you need it to know it. In a way, it's part of a process. It's part of a momentum. Sometimes the momentum reaches bubble territory, and then things start to contract again.
Thank you, Alejandro. Actually, like one of the things you mentioned earlier about the revival of cocktails and the fact that actually vermouth is, many consumers are probably drinking some cocktails with vermouth in it. You said like 30% of the top 10 cocktails in the world are actually with vermouth. My question is a bit of a chicken and egg question. Like, was the revival of the Negroni cocktail that Filiberto and I actually love, pushing the vermouth category and the rise and the need for many different brands, or was it actually the growth of the vermouth category that actually pushed bartenders into finding a way to do something with the revived product and actually taking out from the drawer the Negroni cocktail and making it famous again?
Yeah, well, actually, the Negroni is the #2 most drunk cocktail in the world. So it no doubt that it has played a huge factor in the revival of vermouth. Even if when you order a Negroni in almost any bar in the world, it will tell you it has Campari, it will tell you the name of the gin, and it will tell you sweet vermouth. Sure. Like it doesn't really matter what vermouth it has, when in fact probably vermouth is of the 3 ingredients the one that, depending on which vermouth you use, will most change the way the cocktail tastes. So I do think that yes, it has played a role when so many people are drinking one drink and they don't have a choice in how to mix it. Obviously, it gives us a territory for a lot of us to come in and say, okay, I have an opinion on how you should infuse a little bit of character into your Negroni. But not only. I mean, I think that's true very much for the Anglo-Saxon world. It's something that never went away in Italy, and perhaps it has become even bigger in the last few years. But if we look at countries like Spain, vermouth is growing in a completely different way. The tradition there is drinking it more by its own. So there is also some element. So there's different trends on how vermouth is growing around the world. It's not just the Negroni.
These days, before the COVID pandemic, but we see it also now. We discussed this with Filiberto many times in some of the studies that we carried out together on the rise of pre-batched cocktails, draft cocktails, packaged cocktails, and so on. How do you work with that? In your strategy with Nove di Dante, are you playing in that space with key opinion leading bartenders around the world, creating cocktails that are made with Nove di Dante, or are you more let's say a purist? Like you go more the neat way and just have it as a as your, let's say, strategy?
No, I'm not a purist. I do believe it. I'm a big fan of cocktail culture as well, and I think that vermouth has an increasing role to play in it, at least a branded role or a named role to play in it as well. I'm actually very fascinated by the whole movement around pre-batch cocktails. It's having been in the industry for a while, it's not an easy thing to do, primarily because of cost, packaging, logistics, etc. But it has been really a very important tool for the HoReCa and for the bar industry during this crisis. So it in many cases it has allowed them to continue to have, although a continued stream of income, and I think that has been great. I don't know how it will continue in the future, the pre-batch cocktail. I do think it will stay. I think that bars, as they have discovered an opportunity for a takeaway, let's call it, or for at-home consumption, there will certainly be a lot of models developing of how that can perpetuate itself in time, and it will be very interesting to follow. For us with Nove di Dante, we're a very young company, so in a way, this crisis has caught us a bit too early to play a significant role in it. But yes, I mean, we will obviously very much look to partner with our partners in different markets and with the bartending community to see how we can play our part in it as well.
Thank you. And I have a last question. You mentioned earlier the the polarization. Let's say, like, consumers are looking for lower alcohol consumption. At the same time, you mentioned, like, the gin and tonic was, the drink of the decade. I like that terminology because it's very much so. Like that has made people, together with IPAs and so on, like more used to bitter flavors. But we also see, a rise, for example, in the US of these hard seltzers, which is a bit of the other extreme of the Nolo. In one there's spirit with no alcohol, and in the other one there's, let's say, water or liquids with added alcohol. Where does vermouth play in this space? Is it sort of like stuck in between, or it plays along these trends, or how do you see that?
I think we're in the sweet spot. We're in the perfect territory of what a balanced lifestyle is. We keep talking about Mediterranean diet. Well, part of the Mediterranean diet is a conscious but also moderated approach and interaction with alcohol, and that has been made possible mainly because aperitifs, of which one vermouth is one of the leading figures, right? The whole thing around low alcohol, hard seltzers, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, as somebody who loves innovation and who loves the industry and who loves people coming up with new ideas that challenge the status quo of the thinking, it really it's great, and it's interesting because no alcohol or no low it aims to take the alcohol out of a drink, and hard seltzer aims to put alcohol on a non-alcoholic drink. Personally, I think, however, that it would be interesting. I mean, it would be difficult to see where it all goes. I'm much more interested in how to put a little bit of alcohol into some things than how to take alcohol out of it. I do think that there is a need and room for grown-up drinks beyond Coca-Cola that you can enjoy when you don't want to have alcohol. But we're seeing a lot of things out there, and a lot of them are nonsensical, and there is no rules, which is okay in a sense. But I think as a consumer, if I'm going to be asked to pay the same amount of money for a product that I would pay if it had alcohol, where about a third of the price or up to a third of the price can be taxed, then I need to really, really like the drink if it is going to cost that much money without alcohol. So I do think that something will succeed. I don't know what it will be, but when it does succeed, it will be because people like it and because it's very cool, not because it doesn't have alcohol.
That's a very good answer. Filiberto, I think I leave the stage to you back.
I like that. So, linking on your just comment on the no trend and the hard seltzers, with your experience in spirits and being an entrepreneur now in spirits, what do you see in the next 18, 24, and 36 months as emerging trends across the boundaries in beverages? Is there anything that you are expecting to happen, or some trends or fashions which, they lost their juice and so they're going to get out of the way, or something which is actually catching up and we should all be aware of?
Look, we're an industry which very often we get put into the FMCG bucket, but actually, if anything, we're slow-moving consumer goods. Perhaps with the exception of beer. The trends take a long time to develop. A lot of people are discovering Aperol now, or they discovered it in the last couple of years, but very few people know that Aperol has been pushed for the last 15. It usually takes around 7 to 8 years for a trend to develop in the industry. I think that the next trend that we will see in the next year is something that's already happening somewhere. And in this industry, we tend to talk of global trends, but actually they tend to be quite regional. Gin tonic certainly has been the cocktail of the decade in Europe. It has not been the case in the US, where they are going through a tequila perhaps being the drink of the decade. So I think it'll be interesting to see whether gin and tonic passes over to the US and whether tequila has a chance of growing in Europe. They both are big questions in the industry. I think that we will continue to see the growth of lower alcohol products, and obviously I firmly believe in vermouth, and that's where my and Kaliro's personal bet is on. And it'll be interesting to see if hard seltzers can make it across the Atlantic. I think that there is a chance because of the Anglo-Saxon way in the UK. Or will it be something different, perhaps more inspired in the Italian aperitivo, which plays a similar role in a pre-batch or RTD way, with a similar cost structure? That could be as well. So in Italy, you have a lot of experience with products like that. So we will see. It will be fascinating.
Yeah, but I agree with you that when we talk about fast-moving consumer goods, we almost give this sense of speed, and then as an advisor to Philips, I was working in consumer electronics, and basically, literally, the cost of a screen, of an LCD screen, it's valid, or LED, it's valid for 3 days. 3 days after the cost is changed. That's fast moving. I mean, you set cost of the bottle probably for 3 years, and nothing else changes. So that's an idea of the change of pace. But we have this idea, or also when reacting in fast moving, usually takes you 3 months to know that you have a problem, and 3 months to plan for a solution. So before you do something, half a year is gone. I mean, and then you want to execute it. You need to go and negotiate it with your trade, and that takes even longer, probably. So I like your insight. Yeah, it's very
imagine if you wanted to launch a new 20-year-old whiskey. Before you launch, you've already had 20 years happen before you.
That's true for whiskeys. It's true for aged rooms. So I think it's part of the problem with the category. Let's talk to Alex, the entrepreneur. So you launched this company about a year and a half ago, more or less, no?
Actually, well, we launched Nove di Dante we bottled in the first week of October 2019. Okay, so yeah. It's been just 9 months.
9 months.
Frantic 9 months.
And then COVID-19 happened. And as you said, this is, economists tend to agree that this is a different, it's not an economic shock to the extent that in an economic shock, like when there is an oil shock, the economy goes back to the initial path. Whereas we know we are looking for a new reality and things are changing. So how was your experience? What has impacted you the most? What have you learned from that as an entrepreneur in this moment?
Look, I mean, having lived through quite a lot of crises through my career, I thought that nothing could surprise me, and I had lived it all, and probably this has been unlike nothing ever before, right? Because of how, in a way, time has frozen. There was very little that we could do. Although time has frozen for everybody except bills. You still had to pay bills. That was the only thing that I still had alive during the pandemic. In any crisis, you have certain rules, that you have to follow. I think that these ones is not different. You just they're magnified. So first, conserve cash. Make sure you can live tomorrow. Second of all, go through all your cost base and see what you don't need and do what you cannot do. Really value and work at your relationships, whether they are with people who work with you or with your partners or with your customers, because you're going to need them when you're at the end. Don't lose track of your vision and never mind what the new reality is going to be. What's your reality going to be? So what's your vision? Why are you doing this? What are your values? What are the things that you, even in the worst case scenario, and we have lived through a worst case scenario, there are things that you will not allow yourself to do because that's who you are, right? So a lot of vision and values, a lot of thinking. When you cannot work on the present, work on the future. If you cannot do anything today, accelerate some of the things that you can do for the future. So we have been working a lot on our second product. And in fact, we're going to be doing the first sizable batch of a formula for our second product next week in Alba. So I think that you need to do all of these things. You need to stay positive. As soon as the crisis hit, I created a new mantra for myself, which was that I was too small to fail. And that has, in a way, helped me through this period, and hopefully in conversations that I've had with so many people that I've had the opportunity of connecting and reconnecting. Hopefully it can help them as well.
I think this is a beautiful mantra, by the way. Too small to fail. I can't fail. Full stop. And how about the entrepreneur? I mean, how do you keep yourself healthy and mentally prepared for all these? Being an entrepreneur is not easy. Full stop. When there is a lot of literature out there and talks about entrepreneurship, and it's always very glamorous and it's always very cool and talking to incredible people. But the truth of the matter is that being an entrepreneur, that's the end of the road. Being an entrepreneur at the very beginning of the road it's everything but glamorous. So how do you prepare yourself, and how do you keep that mental strength? You as Alex, giving advice to emerging entrepreneurs in Europe, what do you do? What would you recommend them to do?
Look, I mean, obviously, I mean, I think that it's being an entrepreneur, for me at least, and before this, I have worked in a career with a stable income all of the time. So obviously, a lot of the worries that everybody has is what's going to happen tomorrow. You know, am I going to be able to pay that, or so on? Or so yes, I think being an entrepreneur for me is 50% the most exciting thing I've ever done, and 50% the most scary thing that I've ever gone through. You know, and unfortunately, it's never 50-50. It's kind of like 100-0 and 100-0. You know, so you go through periods of excessive euphoria and periods of huge dramatism. What's important? Well, I think it's important to go through both of them. If not, you cannot live in a fantasy world all of the time. You do need to put the feet on the ground and touch reality and confront difficult questions and difficult problems on a regular basis. But don't dwell on it. Don't make that the center of everything that you do, because it will just drive you down. Back down to the first circle of hell, you know. You're gonna have to go straight back up.
It takes a while then to go back up. And there is purgatory in the middle, tiring. By the way. Yeah, there is purgatory in the middle, which is not pleasant
yes,
either.
I mean, but at the end of the day, look, I mean, it's not something that you need to do by yourself. Entrepreneurship very often feels like you against the world, and it shouldn't. You should have a group of friends, of collaborators with whom you can you can share not only the positive moments, but also help each other out of the difficult ones. You know, so I would say if the most important thing is probably have a good support group, and perhaps also a bottle of Nove di Dante at home, so you can open it, enjoy a good drink, because everything always looks a lot better afterwards.
Yeah, I reckon it's true. One last question on my side, and now this is, you know, Alex is Alex, but Alex, the person with a very terrific career in one of the largest spirit companies. So you've seen the world, you've managed businesses of different sizes. If you were to give advice to Spanish and Italian mid-size food and beverage producers today, you know, we are almost at the end of June. There is this question mark of what's going to happen in the summer. A lot of outlets in the on-premise are not reopening. The ones who are reopening, to be honest with you, they probably don't have a lot of cash. So if they have a business, you'll see your payments being delayed via distributors, via wholesalers. So the situation is not very pinky, so to speak, or rosea, as we say in Italian. But what would you recommend, you know, to these guys with companies in food and beverages from 50 to 100, 150 million euros? What can they do? What they should do? What should be their thinking and their approach?
Well, whenever you go through an earthquake, you know, when an earthquake hits your home, the first thing you need to do when you rebuild it is to check which parts of the walls are still strong and standing, and which parts you need to knock down and rebuild. Yeah. So I would say, look, I mean, there's still a lot of what you're doing, which is still very solid. You have worked a lot of years to bring it to where it was before COVID came. So check what's still there. Who can you work with? How can you take care of your customers, of your partners? How you can work with each other, perhaps in a more collaborative way than before, because you're going to need each other. They're going to be probably in the same boat as you are, and make sure that you have that solid footing that keeps you safe and where you can still sleep at night, and then. When for the other part, the part that you need to rebuild, I would say ask yourself, how would you do it differently? You had a house before, you lived in it. There were things you loved and it was your memories, but there were things that even when it was up, you wanted to change. And it was, you didn't have the money or you didn't have the time. Well, now you have to change them. So are you just going to quickly build them back up to the way you had them before because you'll feel safe? Or are you going to take this opportunity to have the house you always wanted?
I think that's great advice. Thank you. Chris, one last question from you.
Yes. I would like to go back to the on-trade, my big love. I mean, like, what in your opinion, in your experience, like, I mean, you are a provider of, drinks, and in this case, vermouth, to the on-trade entrepreneurs, like staying in the entrepreneur environment. How can you as a provider in general, not you, Alex, but, providers in general, and what we can do as consumers, to help, on-trade to go back on its feet and, and shine again and give us amazing experiences that has always given us, like, for the last decades?
Well, I think the first one we can all do, whatever each one of us do, we are all are potential or can be potential consumers, right, and potential clients of these places. I think that the most important thing right now is to not be afraid, to be safe, but not to be afraid. We know now more than we knew 4 months ago about how we can protect ourselves and others, right? So and the professionals of the on-trade, they're going through huge efforts to make their places as safe as possible, right? So I think that the best that we can do is to go out there to consume, to enjoy some great time with a few friends, enjoy some great cocktails, a little bit of food, of amazing food, and just help the business by allowing it to be a business. So that'll be the main one. As a company, well, depending on the size of the company and the economic opportunities, different companies will be able to do different things. But all companies can be a listening figure. They can give a helping hand and can be there to hear people's problems and see how we can brainstorm them or help them solve them, right? So I think right now the biggest issue that they all have, however, and it's coming up in a lot of petitions. They've started mainly in the UK, but I know also in Italy. It's about the issue of rent, because the size of the rent is the biggest, probably the biggest item that a closed place has, or a sub-capacity place has. So I ask anyone who is a landlord of a bar to reconsider their fees and their rent, because and to do it in your own interest, because if you don't, you're going to have very soon an empty place.
Thank you.
And I would say that that's particularly important because we know that a lot of these places actually make money for the whole year in a very limited time period. So, let's say 3-4 months. So 8 months they're burning the cash that they do in those 4 months. And therefore, to restart, it's really important to actually reduce the cost base or even delay or make them variable in the sense like I'll pay you, but I'll pay you when I have the cash, when I hit my peak, so to speak. And when you are under capacity, that's difficult. That's very difficult.
Exactly. And there is good news because in the US, I am hearing that there's starting to be some cases of profit sharing between landlords and tenants. So that would be certainly in the right direction. And I mean, listen, I mean, in any crisis, obviously there is a process of natural selection, and the places that are not run properly, they close off, and the places that, and because there are less places, the places that are good, they continue to be filled up, right? But I think that this is a business that is run by incredibly creative and resilient people who are looking for new opportunities every day. You know, so although they're going through very difficult times, I have been very impressed in the interactions I've had with most bar owners and bartenders who have remained incredibly positive and incredibly creative through this period. So congratulations to all of them, really.
Yeah, congratulations. And I think we all need to play a role because, as you say, there is a process of natural selection, but there is a risk of mass extinction, which is problematic, because when the whole on-premise channel gets impacted so hardly, by the way, the cost of food and beverages for everybody else are going up. Let's not forget that. So one thing is, yeah, we cannot afford, we don't want to go out. It's one story, but if we shut down the on-premise, the cost of pasta, the cost of anything, water, beverages, meat, it's going to go up for everybody. Even the ones who couldn't afford to go on premise to begin with. So there is clear economic, let's say, implications for all of this. But it's
probably beyond the scope of the short time we have here today. But I completely agree, and I think that we have seen part of what you've said in the opposite direction, because when the bars and the restaurants closed, all of the products that were destined to there, all of a sudden they were dumped in the supermarkets. So we had very cheap berries, or very cheap certain things that would normally sell primarily in restaurants. But obviously that comes with a flip of what happens afterwards, right? I think on a socio-economical level, the next 10 years are going to be fascinating. When we read the book sometime in the year 2030, we will remember we were there, and our kids who have spent months learning in front of a computer, they will tell their grandkids how they were part of this, you know? So like everything passes, but some things stick. And I think we are about to discover what are the things that stick.
Cool. I agree. So we're coming to an end, and 2 questions for you. Do you actually have any questions for us? And is there a question that you wish we would have asked that we didn't?
Well, I already know your favorite cocktail, so I cannot ask that. All right. What is one wish that you guys have for the future?
Please.
Okay, so I start. A wish is, for properties like the really on trade to get sorted and go back to full strength. as we knew it before, but probably with a bit of renovations and new paint on actually how can we as consumer enjoy it more in a more also sustainable way, because there's also it was not all pink as like as Filiberto said it before, like there were things to be fixed even before COVID-19 happened. So my wish is actually that those things get fixed and there is a more healthy and sustainable on trade for consumers going forward, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And on my side, I would say that I wish we actually learn from this crisis so that we get better ready for the future crisis like this or what not like this. And we also understand that it's easy to choose leaders and politicians who are against something, okay? It's more difficult to find leaders and politicians who are in favor of something and can actually do something and fix it. Sometimes it's not about big problems. Sometimes it's just make train arrive on time. And I think we need a lot more of the latter. And my wish is that we learn from this, because otherwise consumers and people and the education system, it's in the whole chaos. And then I would say on a personal note, I can't wait to go to Italy so I can go and order online and try finally Nove di Dante.
Excellent.
I already made a plan. I know it's on Tannico, so
it's on Tannico, and
so,
in fact,
so I already found it. And as soon as I have my Italian address, I'm gonna get it shipped because I really want to try it. I'm too curious.
Yeah, it's on Tannico in Italy, and also as of this week, we start to launch also with fine spirits. So little by little, we'll start to make our way into the on-trade in Italy. So hopefully you can enjoy it very, very, very soon as well. Yeah. Cool. So and perhaps as a last question, you said what I wish you had asked me. Let me change slightly the question. What do you think it's a trend or a category that we should look at?
Mm-hmm. I think there is, if you look at the herbal liqueurs and bitters in Italy, and I'm a big fan of Campari. I am even a bigger fan of Aperol. I love Fernet Branca. So it's not that I need variety, but I think that except for Aperol, those products are very difficult organoleptically to let's say to get used to. It's an acquainted taste. So. But the bitter is so much about Italian history. It's so much about our roots, our regional roots, our, the different way, the different mixture, how food is different. There is a lot that can be learned about it. So if I were you, I would say, look into the bitter category, not to become the next Campari or the next Aperol, but how to discover, certain elements and ingredients for future generations, for the target that you have in mind, which are stories about, Italian heritage that nobody's telling any longer. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you very much. I'm a big fan of bitters and amaros as well. And I think that they're very interesting category as well, which, although it's not only one player only, it is also quite monopolistic. So there's some interest in there at all, for sure.
And actually, for me, Filiberto, you stole the category. Actually, I wanted to say bitter, but I need to think of something else now. Actually, I start from probably I would start from a drink. You know, like when of course, like wherever I go around the world, where we could travel, hopefully soon again, I was always ordering a Negroni, and I was in Nomad Bar in the Nomad Hotel in New York, and I asked the bartender for a Negroni, and the guy said, "Have you ever tried mezcal Negroni?" And I said, "Actually not." And he said, like, "Well, you should." And he gave one to me. And since then, I must say, like, I really liked it. And you know, and probably was the US version of a Negroni sbagliato, let's call it, no? Like he changed the gin that was more like European, probably for a more Mexican, North American taste. And since
With
then,
the
I
smoky
started
taste
drinking,
and so on.
absolutely,
Yes.
and I started drinking mezcal. And again, when I went to Mexico City for work last year, you know, I brought back a nice bottle. So I would probably start from a Negroni and, you know, and explore the different, you know, components. And that's how I would, you know, do the strategy. It would be like a Negroni strategy type of thing. So of course, gin is quite crowded, as we discussed. Bitters, Filiberto mentioned it already, and I totally agree, and I share his feelings about the category. And so, you know, some more exotic flavors could be something to play with into the, you know, mezcal tequila that you mentioned before category. That could be probably something that we will see more and more happening in Europe.
Excellent. I like that. I'm a big fan of a mezcal Negroni as well. So yes, thank you very much, guys. I mean, really, these good thoughts.
Alex, thank you very much for your time. Chris, thank you for your support in this chat. It was really very inspiring, very interesting and insightful. And good luck with Kaliro and Nove di Dante.
Thank you very much. Salute.
Sempre salute. Grazie.
Thank you, guys.